Foreign policy refers to the goals and actions of the United States government in the international system. Just as in domestic policy, the three branches of government, executive, legislative, and judiciary, have specific roles assigned to them in foreign policy making and shaping. Today we're going to talk about, in this short video, the role of the president, part of the executive branch. So the Constitution states two main roles that the president has as far as foreign policy. One, that of chief diplomat. So the president has the power to receive ambassadors, to appoint ambassadors, and the power to make treaties. In tune with the rest of U.S. government and policy making, the system of checks and balances means that the president, although has the power to appoint the ambassadors, they have to be ratified by 2/3 of the Senate. And the same thing happens with treaties. The second role that the president has in foreign policy is as this of commander-in-chief. This means that the president is in charge of the U.S. armed forces. However, it is Congress that is in charge of war. We will talk about this a little bit further on. The president has several advantages in foreign policy making. The first, the president is able to appoint key cabinet members. This would include, not limited to, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, Treasury, Trade, etc. That all will have some sort of influence in foreign policy making and shaping. Although the Secretary of State is then in charge of the ambassadors and the embassies of the United States abroad, it is the president that appoints the ambassadors, again, with a 2/3 approval from the Senate. The president also appoints the directors of national and central intelligence, security advisors, some of them ratified by the Senate and some of them not. And the president receives information briefings, some of them daily, and some of them the president receives on a need-to-know basis. What does this mean? It means that the president is party to information that no one else has access to. The president will have information instantly and will need to make decisions quickly. This means also that the president is the chief negotiator as part of chief diplomat. What does this mean? As a negotiator, the president is going to be the only representative of the United States in foreign affairs. This was ratified and determined by the Supreme Court in 1936, that the presidency will be the sole organ in charge of foreign affairs. Why would this be? Well, the president and the vice president are the only elected officials in the United States that are elected nationally. The rest of elected officials, all senators, congressmen, congresswomen, they are all elected by their state, not national. So if you're going to have one voice that's going to be representing the nation in foreign affairs, then it would require to be the one that is voted and that is elected nationally. However, there's one thing here: as chief negotiator, as chief diplomat, the president has the ability to do something called executive agreements. And executive agreements are agreements that are binding and the president can sign with other countries. However, these executive agreements do not need to be approved by Congress. This has been a sticking point in general because these executive agreements mean it's a double-edged sword. It means that the president can sign agreements and that maybe things that the Congress will not approve. However, it also means that his successor or her successor can just, by the stroke of a pen, sign them away and leave or change these agreements. So if the president wants an agreement or a treaty to be binding, then they will need to have the Congress approval. This happens, for example, with some of the trade agreements. The president has the ability to have a team that will negotiate with the agreement, that will do all of the groundwork with these agreements, and then pass them to Congress for approval. The advantage of the president is the president has shaped this treaty. The president has put it forth, and Congress can only vote yes or no. Giving the president so much power in foreign affairs is considered something called presidential preeminence. And that is this idea that the president should have the power to deal with foreign states as the president feels should happen. So there are others who would rather not see presidential preeminence, but they would see a shared preeminence of and shared power in foreign policy making. The president, however, does have restrictions. First of all, war. It is only Congress that can declare war. And of course, Congress is the one that decides if you can pay for war or not, because Congress has the purse. And we will talk about in another video in more detail what Congress can do and what the role of Congress is in foreign policy making. The judicial branch has a smaller role in this sense, although they're the ones that are going to determine when there is a discrepancy on whether a power lies in the presidency or in Congress. So the judicial branch is the one to go to when there is a discussion on what the president is doing is legal, or whether Congress allowing or not allowing is legal. After the escalation of the war in Vietnam, a very important resolution was passed in Congress, and this is the War Powers Resolution of 1973. And what this War Powers Resolution does is say, okay, yes, the president is party to the information necessary to deploy the armed forces. The original writers of the Constitution expected that the only time the president could declare war or go into war without Congress formally declaring war was if the United States was the party that received aggression from another country. So if another country started a war, then the United States could go into war without the approval of Congress. However, this really hasn't happened since World War II. And the War Powers Resolution of 1973, in the middle of the Cold War, said, okay, yes, the president might have reason to deploy armed forces. However, because Congress is the one that's supposed to declare war, then there has to be some sort of restriction and reining in of the president. And this resolution says that, yes, the president can deploy armed forces, but must advise Congress and let them know, notify Congress, within 48 hours of deploying armed forces. With all the evidence of why it was necessary to deploy the armed forces, and if Congress decides that there wasn't reason for this deployment, then the president, unless there is an extension, the president must return the armed forces within 60 days. The last restriction towards the president, but a very important one, is public opinion. So as we look at other shapers and influencers, we'll see how, for example, the press or other government officials might shape or just sort of guide public opinion towards other towards what they consider important. But again, the president is going to be restricted by Congress in war, by the judicial branch in the case that a person or sometimes it's Congress, sometimes it's a company that sue or, well, put into question the legality of an action of a president, and the judicial branch then comes into play to decide whether the president was acting within his or her right or not. And public opinion, well, at the end of the day, they will come through in the polls. So this was the presidency. And in the next videos, we will look at some of the other actors involved in foreign policy making or shaping.